Hey everyone! Tonight, we're sinking into the strange, surprisingly complex world of medieval sleep. From straw-stuffed pallets and drafty huts to silken futons in the courts of Japan, from monks who barely slept at all to brothel beds designed for spectacle, this is the story of how people found rest long before the modern bed existed. Before we get started, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And in the comments, let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see this little community gathering from all over the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe put on a fan for that soft, lulling background hum, and let's settle in. Close your eyes and picture this. It's the dead of night in the year 1374. You awaken, not to the soft chime of your smartphone alarm, but to the echoing clang of a distant church bell, marking the hour of matins. Its sound rolls through the narrow, freezing streets like a stern reminder, even the night isn't truly yours. Your bed, if we're being generous with the word, is a lumpy sack of straw. It scratches your skin through the single rough linen shift you sleep in, and something in the straw shifts back. Probably a mouse. Possibly worse. You don't panic, you've learned not to. The smell of smoke from the dying hearth mixes with the damp earthy musk of your home, human sweat, wet wool, a hint of last night's pottage, and the unmistakable tang of the goat sleeping 2 feet away from your feet. You roll over, careful not to elbow your brother or grandmother. Privacy? That's a modern fantasy. Here, warmth trumps modesty. Every living thing in the house, family, livestock, maybe even the neighbor's chicken, huddles in the same space, because it's the only way to make it through the night without freezing. In the dark, you grope for your wool nightcap, tugging it low over your ears. Without it, the winter air will bite at your scalp like tiny, invisible teeth. The roof above you is thatched, which means the night has a soundtrack, the soft drip of water from a recent rain, the skittering of some rodent braver than it should be, and the occasional, inexplicable creak of wood you hope isn't about to collapse. This is no peaceful slumber. This is survival. And yet, strangely, you're not meant to sleep all the way through. In another hour, like countless others across Europe, you'll awaken on purpose, right in the middle of the night, for what people call the watch. It's a quiet, liminal time, a space between two sleeps, meant for prayer, mending, maybe a whispered conversation, or, if you're lucky, a moment of stolen intimacy before the rooster announces that dawn is on its way. And as you lie there, half asleep and half awake, you wonder if the dreams you just left behind were merely dreams. Or omens. In this world, the boundary between the sacred and the superstitious is thin. Welcome to the medieval night, where sleep isn't just rest. It's ritual. It's survival. And sometimes, it's a little terrifying. Imagine, for a moment, that you live in a world without electricity. No buzzing lights. No soft blue glow of a TV muttering to itself in the corner. No lamp to reach for when you hear something creak in the dark. When night falls in medieval Europe, it falls completely. Your home, if you are a peasant, is a single room, its corners swallowed by blackness. A dying fire casts a faint, smoky orange glow, just enough to make out the shifting silhouettes of your family, and the occasional snout or hoof of the livestock you share your space with. Beyond your walls, the village is silent except for the wind and the occasional bark of a dog, an unsettling reminder that not everything out there is sleeping. And yet, in this darkness, there is an unexpected rhythm. Because in the Middle Ages, people didn't sleep the way we do now. We live in an age obsessed with the perfect 8 hours. But in the medieval world, uninterrupted sleep wasn't the goal. It wasn't even the norm. For most people, the night was divided into 2 distinct stretches of slumber. First sleep and second sleep. After sunset, families retired early, curling up in their straw pallets or wooden-framed beds beneath layers of rough wool and, if you were lucky, a patchy fur or two. They would drift off into that first deep, restorative stretch of sleep. And then, around midnight, they woke up. Not by accident. Not because of insomnia. On purpose. This middle-of-the-night wakefulness, often called the watch, was an accepted, even expected, part of life. During this liminal time, people might tend the hearth, check on animals, or, for the devout, kneel in the cold darkness to whisper prayers. Monks used this time for matins, an hour of chanting psalms and flickering candlelight, their voices echoing off stone walls as the rest of the world slept. But it wasn't only for chores or prayer. Physicians of the era considered this the best time for intimacy. Manuals for married couples advised that between first and second sleep, the body was well rested and calm of mind, a medieval euphemism for you're awake, you're warm, and you've still got time before sunrise. And then, after an hour or two of this quiet wakefulness, people returned to bed for their second sleep, often filled with lighter dreams, until the rooster crowed or the church bells signaled dawn. This watch wasn't just practical. It carried a kind of quiet mystique. In those hours between two sleeps, when the village was dark and still, people believed the world felt thinner, more permeable. A time when prayers traveled faster, dreams spoke clearer, and the boundary between the living and the spiritual blurred. This was when you might reflect on your sins, confess quietly to your God, or, in some villages, share stories and dreams with your family while the fire smoldered. And perhaps, if you believed the more superstitious warnings, you'd stay awake long enough to keep the devil at bay. Because many thought the night belonged to him. Medieval nights were not simply quiet, they were deeply spiritual, and sometimes frightening. Dreams weren't dismissed as random nonsense. They were messages. They could come from God, from saints, or from something far more sinister. Theologians wrote entire guides for interpreting them. A dream of fire could mean cleansing, or it could mean hell. A dream of water could mean renewal, or drowning. A dream of a shadowy figure standing over your bed? That one needed no interpretation. Many people feared night hags, malevolent beings who sat on your chest while you slept, suffocating you in your dreams. Today, we might call it sleep paralysis. Back then, it was a demon, or perhaps a witch, coming for your soul. It's easy to imagine how a peasant in a one-room hut, wrapped in a scratchy blanket, half awake in the middle of the night, might come to believe such things. In a way, the medieval night was an ongoing negotiation with forces you couldn't see. Every evening, before bed, prayers were said, not simply for rest, but for protection. Children were taught to murmur blessings as they pulled their rough wool caps over their heads. Adults recited psalms like contracts with God. If I should die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take. It sounds sweet to modern ears. In reality, it was an insurance policy for your soul. Because when you closed your eyes in 1374, you didn't know if you'd wake again. Plague, fire, demonic temptation, or simply the cold, always the cold. In this way, medieval sleep wasn't just biological. It was spiritual. Every night was a small rehearsal for death. And what did these bedrooms look like? For the peasantry, a single, windowless room with a dirt floor. A straw pallet on the ground, maybe slightly elevated on a wooden frame if you were lucky. You probably slept in the same clothes you wore all day. Your nightcap, a soft wool cone of fabric, wasn't fashion. It was survival. If you were wealthy, your bed was a fortress. Heavy wooden frames, canopies to keep out the drafts, feather-stuffed mattresses so valuable they were passed down in wills. Some nobles even kept small lapdogs in bed, not for companionship, but for warmth, a tiny luxury heater with teeth. But rich or poor, you shared your sleeping space. With family, with servants, with animals, and with whatever moved in the straw when you shifted at night. So as you lie there, in the dark, somewhere between first and second sleep, you can't help but think, this isn't just rest. This is survival. And maybe, just maybe, this is a conversation with the divine. If you were to travel back to medieval Europe, you'd quickly discover that bedtime looked very different depending on your station in life. For the overwhelming majority, the peasants, sleep wasn't about comfort. It was about surviving the night. For the upper classes, it was an opportunity for display, beds as thrones, sheets as status symbols, and sleep itself as a marker of privilege. And between these extremes, you'd find monasteries, inns, and all the places where communal life blurred the line between public and private rest. Let's start with the people who made up about 90% of the population, peasants. Your house is a single room made of wattle and daub, a polite way of saying sticks covered in mud and dung. The roof sags with thatch that drips in the rain, and the floor is packed dirt. When it gets too muddy, you scatter rushes or straw, which soak up everything from spilled pottage to chicken droppings. Your bed? Likely a straw pallet, known simply as a pallet or bed sack, laid directly on the ground or, if you're lucky, perched on a wooden frame. There's no linen sheet to pull over you. Linen is expensive and reserved for those with coin. Instead, you sleep in the same clothes you wore during the day, wrapped in a coarse wool blanket that smells faintly of smoke, sweat, and goat. And speaking of goats, you're probably not sleeping alone. In medieval Europe, the concept of my bed, my space didn't exist for most people. Whole families, parents, children, grandparents, often slept together on the same straw pile. Livestock joined in, too. A pig in the corner helped keep the room a little warmer. A dog curled at your feet wasn't a pet, it was survival. If you were traveling, things got even cozier. Inns were rare and expensive, and even then you didn't get a private room. You rented space in a shared bed with strangers. Imagine trudging into a village after a long journey and paying good money to squeeze between two snoring farmers who don't even know your name. Privacy wasn't a right. It was a luxury. Now, step inside the manor house of a noble. Here, the bed isn't a humble pile of straw, it's the most important piece of furniture in the room, sometimes the entire house. Noble beds were large wooden frames, often carved and decorated. They were stuffed with layers, feather mattresses, linen sheets, and wool blankets, sometimes topped with furs. They had curtains, not for privacy, but for warmth, trapping precious heat inside what was essentially a small, fabric-walled room. These beds were so valuable they were mentioned in wills. You might not inherit your uncle's land, but you could inherit his bed. And of course, this wasn't just about sleep. Noble bedrooms were semi-public spaces. It wasn't unusual for guests to gather in a bedchamber during the day, lounging or conducting business. In some cases, sleeping itself became performative. An audience could watch a noble wake up, receive visitors, or even get dressed. Where a peasant bed was about survival, a noble bed was about status. Contrary to what period dramas might suggest, most peasants didn't have pajamas. They simply slept in what they wore. Long shifts, tunics, or even nothing at all if the season was warm enough and modesty wasn't a concern. For those who could afford them, nightcaps were essential. Medieval homes were drafty, and keeping your head covered at night could mean the difference between comfort and waking up with what we now call hypothermia. These caps were often long and pointed, made of wool or linen, and sometimes doubled as symbols of modesty, especially for married women. The wealthy, however, sometimes had dedicated nightshirts or chemises, long, loose garments of linen that could be luxuriously embroidered. But even the rich weren't immune to the cold. There are records of nobles sleeping with heated stones wrapped in cloth, or even small dogs under the covers for warmth. For all their material differences, rich and poor shared one thing: fear of the night. The medieval imagination saw the darkness as a liminal, dangerous space. Alone in bed, you were vulnerable, not just to thieves or wild animals, but to demons. Sleep paralysis wasn't a medical condition. It was a visitation by a night hag, a demonic entity that sat on your chest and stole your breath. To protect against such evils, people said prayers, made the sign of the cross, or slept with religious charms near their beds. Even dreams weren't safe. They were messages, sometimes from God, sometimes from the devil. A bad dream wasn't just unsettling. It could be a sign of moral weakness or divine warning. And if you woke up in the middle of the night, and you often did, you might spend a few quiet moments in prayer, not just for yourself, but for everyone sleeping under your roof. By morning, sleep didn't end gently. There was no snooze button. The first sound you'd hear was likely the church bell, dragging you from your second sleep into the shivering gray of dawn. You'd stumble from your bed, your joints stiff from the cold, your body itching from straw and sweat, ready to face another day of labor. Or, if you were lucky, another day of living comfortably off the labor of others. Because in medieval Europe, even in sleep, class was inescapable. If medieval Europe's night was often a battle, against the cold, against fear, against the dark itself, the Arab-Islamic world of the same era paints a strikingly different picture. Here, the night isn't merely endured. It is savored. It is ritualized. It is transformed into an experience that soothes both body and soul. It is the 10th century, and you are in Córdoba, Al-Andalus, one of the brightest lights of the medieval world. Even after sundown, the city doesn't plunge into silence. It hums. Oil lamps glow in narrow alleyways, their flickering light reflecting off whitewashed stone. Courtyards exhale the perfume of orange blossoms and jasmine. In the distance, the melodic call to prayer drifts from a minaret, a final reminder of devotion before sleep. You step inside a riad, a house designed to turn inward, protecting its inhabitants from the noisy outside world. The air is cool, thick stone walls have captured the day's shade, and the sounds of the city fade behind you, replaced by the steady burble of a fountain in the courtyard. The moonlight passes through latticed wooden screens, mashrabiyas, scattering across the floor in soft geometric patterns. This isn't merely a home. It's a sanctuary. Your sleeping chamber feels worlds away from the itchy straw pallets of European peasants. The floor is covered with Persian carpets, soft and warm against bare feet. Along the walls, low divans are layered with cushions stuffed with cotton and wrapped in silks dyed deep indigo and saffron. If you are wealthy, your mattress is filled with cotton, clean, breathable, and infinitely more comfortable than hay. Even in modest households, beds are carefully arranged with layered wool and linen. To rest here is to be cradled, not simply laid down. And the bed itself? It isn't just for sleeping. It's a multi-purpose space, a seat for reading, a lounge for listening to poetry, even a quiet corner for personal prayer. Many are framed in carved cedar or cypress, some with inlays of ivory, making them as much a work of art as a piece of furniture. Orientation matters too. Beds are often positioned so that sleepers face Mecca, so even rest is a subtle form of devotion. Nightfall in the Arab-Islamic world isn't a frantic end to the day. It's an interlude of beauty. After the final prayer of the evening, Isha, families gather in the majlis, a reception room filled with cushions and low tables. Stories are told. Poetry is recited. Sweet sherbets or spiced milk are shared under the glow of lantern light. Then comes the quiet ritual of wudu, the washing of face, hands, and feet before bed. It's not just hygiene. It's a purification, a resetting of the soul. Before lying down, you recite short verses from the Quran, protective words to guard against nightmares or ill omens. In this world, sleep is a divine rhythm, a gift from God. And we made your sleep for rest. If you are not just wealthy, but of the elite, a vizier in Baghdad, a courtier in Córdoba, or a prince in Cairo, your night takes on a ceremonial quality. Palace etiquette around sleep is documented in fragments by chroniclers. Al-Muqaddasi, the 10th century geographer, described wealthy men in Damascus reclining on beds draped with brocade and silk, shaded by curtains like tents. These curtains did more than trap heat. They created a sense of sanctified privacy. In the Umayyad and Abbasid palaces, beds weren't just tucked away in private rooms. Sometimes they were set within semi-public reception chambers, like cushioned thrones, where a high-ranking guest might be invited to lounge while listening to a poet or musician late into the night. To rest wasn't simply to sleep, it was to perform refinement. Even the caliphs had unique rituals. It is said that Harun al-Rashid, the Abbasid caliph immortalized in the tales of 1001 Nights, would often listen to stories before retiring, blending entertainment and statecraft into his bedtime routine. How did outsiders view these sleeping customs? Ibn Jubair, a 12th century Andalusian traveler, wrote in awe of Damascus, describing goose houses where even pilgrims of modest means were offered beds and coverings of cotton, clean and perfumed, as though one rested in the houses of kings. To him, the Arab Islamic night was suffused with generosity. Even a stranger could expect a place that felt soft and sacred. European travelers, by contrast, were sometimes shocked. A 14th century Italian merchant in Cairo noted the strangeness of rooms open to the air, where fountains sang and men slept as if in gardens. To someone used to the enclosed, smoke-choked homes of Europe, this openness felt otherworldly. But perhaps the most fascinating part of the Arab-Islamic night was what happened after the body surrendered to sleep. Dreams were not dismissed as idle imagination. They were carefully interpreted, classified into 3 types by scholars like Ibn Sirin, whose Book of Dreams became one of the most referenced texts of the medieval period. The first, dreams from God, often symbolic or instructive, worthy of recording and sharing. The second, dreams from the self, reflections of one's own fears, desires, and preoccupations. The third, dreams from Shaitan, temptations or terrors meant to mislead the sleeper. Imagine waking in the cool pre-dawn hours after a dream of fire or water, and turning to a learned man or a dream interpreting text for meaning. Was the fire a warning of divine wrath? Was the water a sign of purification? This wasn't superstition, it was a form of dialogue between the human and the divine. For pious sleepers, even the dreams were part of their religious practice, to be interpreted and integrated into their waking lives. In this context, the practice of tahajjud, rising for voluntary prayer between sleeps, takes on new weight. In the stillness of the night, when the stars are bright over Damascus or the desert wind hums through the palms of Baghdad, you rise quietly. You wash again. You spread a soft prayer rug on the cool tiled floor. You kneel and recite verses, believing this is the hour when your voice carries most purely to God. You finish, and the silence of the house presses in like a blessing. This isn't an interruption of sleep. It's an elevation of it. When you finally return to your bed, the cushions plumped, the curtains drawn, the space feels alive with more than luxury. It feels purposeful. Your room, with its soft water sounds and scented air, has become a place of renewal, for your body, yes, but also for your soul. In Europe, night was often a fearful unknown. In the Arab-Islamic world, the night was tamed, shaped into a canvas for beauty, ritual, and divine connection. If the Arab-Islamic world mastered the art of making night a ritual of beauty, and medieval Europe often slept as an act of survival, then Byzantium, the Eastern Roman Empire, found its own middle path. In the Byzantine world, night was a blend of imperial refinement, orthodox devotion, and urban sophistication. This was the queen of cities. This was Constantinople. It is the 11th century, and you are walking through Constantinople as the sun dips below the horizon. The city, built on 7 hills and ringed by massive Theodosian walls, glows with a subdued, golden light. Torches flicker along marble colonnades. You hear the distant lapping of the Bosporus against the sea walls, mixed with the soft rhythmic chants of monks reciting evening prayers in the great monasteries that dot the city. The streets don't feel like those of a medieval village. They are alive and orderly, wide processional avenues lined with statues, fountains, and colonnades. Even at night, there is movement, bakers hauling fresh loaves, night guards patrolling the Misi, the main thoroughfare, and nobles returning from late banquets. When you step into a Byzantine home, especially one belonging to a wealthy citizen, the city's energy melts away. The architecture is Roman in heritage, inner courtyards, marble-clad reception rooms, and mosaics that glitter even in dim candlelight. Curtains separate the public spaces from the private, a deeply Roman instinct for controlled intimacy carried into the Byzantine age. And in these private rooms, sleep awaits, refined, ritualized, and deeply tied to faith. Your bedchamber is unlike anything in the smoky huts of medieval Europe. The floor may be of polished stone, but a soft wool carpet covers the space near the bed. Mosaics of saints or abstract patterns climb the walls, their colors muted in the low lamplight. Heavy curtains close off the room, blocking drafts and making the chamber feel like its own little world. If you are wealthy, your bed is a magnificent frame carved from cypress or cedar, perhaps inlaid with ivory or bronze. Upon it rests a feather-stuffed mattress, layered with linen sheets and woolen blankets. The linens, often bleached white or dyed in rich purples and reds, are luxuries passed down through generations. Your pillow, another Roman inheritance, might be filled with down or soft reeds. And yet, for all this luxury, the room is also spiritual. Icons of Christ or the Virgin Mary rest in the corner, often beneath a small hanging lamp. As you prepare for bed, you bow to them, cross yourself, and murmur prayers of protection. Even in sleep, the divine is present. In Byzantine culture, evenings are rarely solitary. Before retiring, families gather in the reception room, sharing wine, cheese, bread, or honeyed pastries while discussing the day's events. Musicians or storytellers might entertain guests. Poetry readings, theological debates, or even informal philosophical discussions could fill these hours. For the pious, the night cannot begin without prayer. The household gathers before icons for Compline, the final prayer service of the day, echoing the practices of the great monasteries. Even after guests leave and the household quiets, devout individuals may keep vigil, reading psalms or meditating in the flickering light of an oil lamp. Monasticism profoundly shaped Byzantine sleep culture. While urban laity might enjoy comfortable, even opulent beds, the monks of Mount Athos or the Studion monastery followed stricter rules, rising at midnight for the all-important Mesonictican service, sleeping in narrow cells, and resting on hard wooden pallets or simple mats. These rhythms trickled into the wider culture. Many laypeople adopted their own version of segmented sleep, rising briefly at night to pray before returning to bed. This wasn't considered disruptive. It was devotion, the soul joining the chorus of monks and angels awake in the darkness. In Byzantium, sleep was fertile ground for divine communication. Dreams were taken seriously, sometimes as warnings from God, other times as temptations from the devil. Hagiographies, saints' lives, are filled with accounts of dreams that offered visions of Christ, the Theotokos, Mother of God, or saints. One story tells of a pious woman in Constantinople who dreamt of the Virgin Mary instructing her to donate her wealth to a local monastery. She awoke, convinced the vision was true, and obeyed. Another tale recounts a monk who saw demons mocking him in his dreams, a sign that he had strayed from his ascetic path. For Byzantines, dreams weren't idle fictions. They were moral and spiritual barometers, to be confessed, interpreted, and acted upon. As you drift towards sleep in Constantinople, the city breathes around you. You hear the distant, haunting chants from the midnight liturgy at Hagia Sophia. You hear the muffled calls of watchmen patrolling the streets, the creak of wagon wheels, and the occasional bark of a dog echoing between stone walls. Beyond it all, the sea whispers against the shores, a constant reminder that this city sits at the meeting point of worlds. Byzantium's night is neither fully Roman nor fully medieval. It is something in between, a bridge between antiquity and Christendom, between imperial grandeur and monastic humility. In its bedchambers, luxury rests beneath icons. In its streets, Roman order hums beneath medieval rhythms. And as you close your eyes in the Queen of Cities, you sense that you are sleeping not just in a place, but in an empire, one that sees even the night as a stage for devotion, refinement, and continuity with 1,000 years of history. Where Constantinople glowed with imperial splendor, and Cordoba hummed with fountains and poetry, the lands of Kyivan Rus and the broader Slavic world felt altogether different. Here, the night belonged to deep forests, wooden towns, and an imagination filled with spirits that moved between the seen and the unseen. The Slavic night was alive, with sounds, with faith, and with a lingering sense of the otherworldly. It is the late 10th century, and you are in Kiev, the mother of Rus cities. The Dnieper glistens in the moonlight, and wooden palisades cast long shadows over muddy streets. The smell of smoke and pine fills the air as fires burn in hearths and torches flicker along the walls of the princely court. Outside the city, the dark is nearly absolute. The forests press in, dense and wild, their silence broken only by the occasional howl of a wolf or the creak of the pines. These woods are not empty, they are thick with stories, with whispers of spirits and creatures who walk the boundary between this world and the next. When you step into a home, it is built of logs, sturdy but simple. The Slavic izba, wooden house, is one room, heated by a massive clay or brick stove that dominates the space. This stove is more than a hearth. It is the soul of the house, the only reliable source of warmth during the bitter winters. It is here, near the stove, that the family sleeps. Beds in Kyivan Rus are utilitarian. Wooden benches or simple raised platforms line the walls, layered with straw mattresses and covered with wool or animal pelts. The wealthier you are, the more furs you pile on, bear, wolf, or fox skins to shield against the punishing cold. But the most coveted sleeping spot isn't a bed at all. It's atop the pechka, the stove. This massive, flat-topped oven retains heat for hours, even days, and in winter, its surface becomes the warmest bed in the house. Children, elders, and anyone sick are given the stovetop place, while others crowd close to it on benches or the floor. Privacy is non-existent. Entire families, and sometimes guests or servants, sleep together in the same space, often in their day clothes, huddled for warmth. In this world, night is for storytelling. As the fire crackles and the wind howls outside, the family gathers around the stove. Elders recount byliny, epic tales of heroes and saints, or share folklore about house spirits, damavo, forest guardians, leshii, or the dangerous water nymphs, rusalki, who might lure the unwary to their deaths. This oral tradition serves more than entertainment. It reinforces values, keeps history alive, and subtly warns against straying too far into the forest or neglecting household rituals. Before bed, prayers are whispered before icons that hang in the red corner, the most sacred space of the house, where Orthodox Christian images blend seamlessly with older Slavic traditions. In some households, small offerings, bread, milk, or even the ashes of burned herbs, are left near the stove to appease the damavo, the protective house spirit believed to keep the family safe through the night. For the Slavs, sleep wasn't just rest. It was a threshold. Dreams were seen as messages, sometimes from God, sometimes from the restless dead. A dream of fire might mean prosperity. A dream of a flowing river could foretell a journey. A dream of death? A warning to make confession or give alms. Women in particular were seen as interpreters of dreams. Folk traditions tell of mothers and grandmothers reading symbols in night visions, offering guidance or warnings based on what the sleeper had seen. To sleep in Kyivan Rus was to open oneself to the unseen, to saints, to spirits, to omens carried by the quiet of the night. By the 11th century, Christianity had firmly taken root in Kyivan Rus, bringing with it the rhythms of Orthodox prayer. Before bed, families crossed themselves and recited psalms. Monks in the great caves of the Kiev-Pechersk Lavra rose at night for vigil prayers, their chants echoing through underground corridors where saints and holy men were entombed. Yet even as orthodoxy spread, old Slavic beliefs endured. The forest still belonged to the leshii, and the hearth still needed its offerings. In this way, the night remained a layered thing, half Christian, half pagan, fully alive. As you drift toward sleep, the sounds of Kyivan Rus surround you. The creak of logs settling in the stove. The muffled breath of family members sleeping nearby. The wind rattling the wooden shutters. And somewhere, far out in the forest, the lonely howl of a wolf. You pull your furs tighter, say one last prayer to the icons in the red corner, and perhaps, quietly, to the house spirit by the stove, and let yourself slip into dreams. In Kyivan Rus, the night was more than darkness. It was a place of convergence, between faith and folklore, between the warmth of the household and the chill of the wild, between the mortal world and the realm of spirits. Here, to sleep was not simply to rest. It was to share in the eternal conversation between the living, the divine, and the mysterious powers of the land itself. If the forests of Kyivan Rus gave sleep a mystical, spirit-haunted character, then medieval Japan transformed it into an expression of harmony between body, space, and the rhythms of daily life. Here, the night wasn't only practical. It was aesthetic. It was ritual. It was woven into the very architecture of the home and the philosophy of living. It is the 11th century, and you find yourself in Heian-kyo, modern-day Kyoto, the heart of the Japanese imperial court. The city is hushed. Beyond its ordered streets, night settles over gently curving rooftops, painted screens, and wooden walkways that creak softly under passing feet. You enter a noble residence, stepping into the cool darkness of its wooden hallways. Unlike the walled stone houses of Europe or the courtyard-centered homes of Cordoba, The Japanese house is open and fluid. Sliding screens, shoji, replace heavy walls. Rooms are adaptable, their function changing from day to night with ease. By lamplight, you see the floor, not of stone or straw, but of tatami, woven rush mats that smell faintly of grass and earth, softening each step. This is the canvas on which the Japanese experience of sleep unfolds. In this world, the bed is not a towering, permanent piece of furniture. It's a temporary arrangement, assembled at night and tucked away at dawn. On the tatami, a thin mattress, futon, is unrolled, topped with soft quilts and a buckwheat hull pillow. For the noble classes, these futons are made with silk covers, stuffed with cotton or layered wadding, while commoners rely on humbler hemp or simple padding. When morning comes, the bedding disappears. Futons are folded and stored in wooden chests or cupboards, leaving the room open for daytime activities, writing poetry, performing music, or receiving guests. In Japan, the bedroom isn't a fixed, private domain. It's a living space in constant transformation. Japan also embraced a polyphasic approach to rest. Nighttime sleep was often broken, not unlike Europe's segmented pattern, but paired with short naps, inamuri, taken throughout the day. For peasants working in the rice paddies, midday naps were survival. For courtiers, they were a kind of sanctioned retreat, often done sitting upright, as though one were merely present while dozing. Even today, the word inamuri implies a social acceptability, the art of resting without fully withdrawing from the world. This cycle of segmented night sleep and intentional daytime napping reflects a culture deeply attuned to seasonal rhythms, daylight, and the body's natural needs. For the aristocracy of the Heian period, evenings were cultivated experiences. By the soft glow of oil lamps, courtiers read poetry, painted, or exchanged letters on delicately perfumed paper. Ladies-in-waiting prepared their long, flowing hair for rest, sometimes braiding or combing it with scented oils to keep it smooth overnight. Sleep came with ritual cleansing, washing hands and face in cool water, anointing the body with light perfumes, and changing into linen or silk night robes. Even rest had a seasonal dimension. Bedding was switched for lighter or heavier layers according to the time of year, matching the Japanese cultural appreciation for the harmony of seasons, kizetsu. In contrast, Buddhist monasteries in medieval Japan approached sleep as an austere discipline. Monks often slept in communal halls, lying side by side on thin mats with minimal covering, their heads shaved and their bodies trained for detachment from luxury. Night was divided by bells and chanting, as monks woke for midnight meditation or sutra recitation before returning to short, regulated rest. For them, sleep was not an indulgence but a tool, a necessary pause between acts of spiritual practice. Japanese culture held a unique fascination for dreams, influenced by Buddhist thought and native Shinto beliefs. Dreams could be messages from the kami, the spirits of nature and ancestors, or visions from the enlightened mind during meditation. Dream incubation practices, borrowed from Buddhist traditions, encouraged seekers to sleep in temples, hoping for dreams that brought guidance or healing. Diaries from Heian noblewomen, like the Pillow Book of Seishanagan, record dreams alongside daily courtly observations, a testament to how sleep and dreams wove into the fabric of self-expression. As you settle onto your futon, the night presses in softly. There are no howling wolves or rattling shutters. Only the hum of crickets, the croak of frogs in a garden pond, the occasional rustle of wind through paper screens. You lie flat, your face turned toward the polished wood ceiling, feeling the coolness of the tatami beneath you, the light weight of a quilt over your body. In this stillness, sleep feels less like escape and more like alignment with the house, the season, the universe itself. In medieval Japan, sleep was not merely recovery. It was an extension of living art, portable, adaptable, and imbued with the quiet beauty of a culture that found grace in simplicity. If sleep in medieval homes was a blend of necessity and custom, there were two places where the night took on entirely different meanings: the monastery and the brothel. In one, the bed was a battleground for the soul. In the other, it was a stage for performance, intimacy, and escape. Imagine stepping into a Benedictine abbey in 12th century France, or a Byzantine monastery carved into the cliffs above the Bosporus. The air is cool and smells faintly of incense and beeswax. The night is regimented, a careful choreography of prayer, meditation, and rest. Monastic sleep was austere by design. In Benedictine houses, monks rested fully clothed on straw pallets or thin mattresses, often without pillows. In the Eastern Orthodox world, some monasteries adopted even harsher practices, sleeping upright in chairs or on wooden benches, heads resting on their arms, to prevent slipping into deep, indulgent slumber. The monastic day and night was punctuated by bells. Compline marked the last prayers before bed, but rest was rarely uninterrupted. At midnight the bell tolled for the nocturnes or mezzonoctican, a night vigil of psalms and chants. Sleep was segmented, shallow, and bracketed by devotion. For these men and women in convents, the bed wasn't for pleasure or comfort. It was a reminder of humility, a daily rehearsal for death. Rest was simply another tool for sanctification, a necessary but tightly controlled act of the flesh, subordinated to the needs of the soul. Now leave the monastery and follow the torchlit streets to the other end of medieval life, the brothel. In bustling trade cities like London, Venice, Cairo, or Constantinople, pleasure houses thrived. Here, beds weren't places of discipline but of performance. In Venice, brothels along the Rio di San Cassiano were brightly painted and lit, offering an escape from the rigid moral codes of the outside world. In London's Bankside district, brothel beds were heaped with quilts, cushions, and sometimes silks, garish by noble standards, but designed to impress clients who craved a touch of luxury. A bed in a brothel wasn't just for sleep. It was the center of the room, a stage where intimacy was both sold and performed. Its appearance mattered, the softness of the bedding, the colors of the curtains, even the smell of perfumed sheets could signal status. For many patrons, these beds offered more than physical pleasure. They offered fantasy, a brief crossing into a world of warmth, touch, and illusion, far from the cold routines of medieval life. And yet, monasteries and brothels shared a surprising commonality. Both transformed the bed into something symbolic. In monasteries, the bed was a place of trial, a constant reminder of mortality and discipline. In brothels, it was a curated illusion, a promise of fleeting transcendence through pleasure. In both cases, sleep, or the lack of it, wasn't just biological. It was deeply cultural, shaped by the competing forces of faith, morality, commerce, and desire. Picture the medieval city. By night, monks wake to chant beneath vaulted stone ceilings while, across town, laughter and lute music drift from behind a brothel's painted shutters. Two worlds coexist in the same darkness, one renouncing the flesh, the other reveling in it, each remaking the meaning of the bed in their own image. If the monastery taught people to see the bed as a tool for salvation, the brothel taught them to see it as a portal into indulgence, intimacy, or simply a reprieve from the hardships of life. And in this tension between austerity and excess, between prayer and pleasure, the medieval night revealed its deepest truth, that even in the dark, people sought meaning, whether in God, in desire, or in the quiet spaces between. We have walked through so many nights together. We've felt the cold bite of a drafty peasant hut in medieval Europe, the soft luxury of cotton-filled mattresses in Cordoba, the incense-scented austerity of Byzantine monasteries, the wild-spirited storytelling by the stoves of Kyivan Rus, the quiet elegance of Heian Japan's tatami rooms, and even the gaudy, perfumed beds of medieval brothels. Across these worlds, one truth emerges: sleep, in the pre-modern age, was never just sleep. For the poor, the night was a fight. A hearth fire barely clinging to life. A sack of straw shared with family, neighbors, and sometimes livestock. A prayer whispered before closing your eyes: if I wake, let me wake whole. For peasants in Europe or farmers in Rus, the bed was simply a place to keep breathing until morning. Survival made sleep a communal act, stripping away any notion of privacy in favor of warmth and safety. For the faithful, monks in stone abbeys, Muslims in the courtyards of Damascus, Orthodox Christians in the candlelit homes of Constantinople, the night was a ladder toward God. They saw sleep as liminal, dangerous, holy. A place where dreams might carry messages, where demons might creep close, where prayers could rise more clearly in the quiet hours between first and second sleep. Rest was framed by ritual, ablutions, blessings, icons, verses. The bed became an altar. And for the wealthy, or those who sold illusions of wealth, sleep was a stage. Feather mattresses, perfumed sheets, and beds so grand they could fill entire rooms. For nobles and courtiers, the bed was part of their public identity, a piece of furniture meant to be admired, even visited by guests. For brothels, the bed was commerce, dressed to seduce, to impress, to momentarily lift a client into a fantasy. If you could stand at midnight in the year 1200 and look out across the world, you would see. In a Benedictine abbey, monks waking for prayer, their chants echoing into the dark. In a Cairo palace, a merchant falling asleep on cotton cushions to the trickle of courtyard fountains. In a Slavic izba, a grandmother telling a story of forest spirits before curling up with her grandchildren by the stove. In a Japanese manor, a noblewoman recording her dreams in a diary by lamplight before folding herself into her futon. In a Venetian brothel, laughter and lute music spilling out into the alley as painted women beckon passing men into rooms where every bed promises escape. The medieval night was as varied as the people who lived it, and their sleep, as layered as their waking lives. What do these beds, straw pallets, cotton-filled divans, hard monastery planks, silken futons, tell us? That sleep reflects our deepest concerns. For some, it was survival. For others, it was sanctity. For others still, it was pleasure or performance. The bed, humble or grand, became a mirror of what mattered most to the people lying within it. Tonight, as you settle into your own bed, soft, private, temperature-controlled, imagine yourself in one of theirs. Feel the rush mats of Kyoto, the cool linen of Cordoba, the scratch of straw in a smoky hut, or the warmth of a stove in a Slavic winter. And ask yourself, if sleep was once survival, once prayer, once performance, what is it for us now? Perhaps, in rediscovering how the medieval world slept, we can remember something our ancestors knew, that night is not just the absence of day. It is its own world, alive with ritual, with mystery, and with the quiet possibility of transformation. And now, I believe you're already drifting off, so just let the soft crackle of the fire carry you into the sweetest dreams.